We all need God. And the only way you're going to have a quiet time when you're busy is if you have a conviction that I really need this.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you ought to just reflect on your own deep sinfulness and consider how much worse we all are. We're bad enough the way it is, okay? But without a quiet time, I'm even worse.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I look at myself sometimes, I go, man, I don't like the way I behave. And then I think, if I didn't have the awareness of God in my life, where I'd given my birth, what would I be like? I don't even want to think about it. I mean, you know, like, I'm actually better.
Exactly.
So it's not that we're all great people as Christians. We're a bunch of sinners. But we're better than we would be without God by a long, long way.
That's right.
Okay? And I just want to encourage us, you know, that's something that your family needs to see, that this is really a priority. And Jesus wasn't just prayer, it was, he really made God a priority, and your kids know what your priorities are.
Yes.
You know, and it's interesting, even if they don't follow what's right, they still know what's important to you by what you do. If they see you reading your Bible, if they see you praying together as parents, if they see you making sure you come to church no matter what, you know, and just making that priority that the kingdom is really got to be first in how we make our decisions, how we spend our time, how we spend our money, and our relationship with God is something we can't compromise because we know how much we need God.
That's right.
And so that's just something I want to encourage us all. Just think about that. Am I making the time to pray? And the busier and more stressed out you are, the more you need it.
Yeah, that's right.
So when it's getting crazy, like when it's getting really crazy, and sometimes, you know, like I have been in the last few years busier than I've ever been at times. Like I didn't know if that was possible, but I actually have been. For periods, not all the time, but for short periods I thought, wow, this is really quite busy. And yet with God, you know, whatever happens, it's humorous. It's like, oh, okay, well, this will be fine. You know, it's because God's with us. Amen?
That's right. Amen.
Can I just say something? I met with the singles this morning, and, you know, in the flow of the lesson, there were a couple of older women there, like 4 or 5 aunties, but it was like 20, 25 single women. And in the flow of the lesson, I asked them if they'd had a quiet time. Because, you know, Sunday morning, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, all the aunties had their quiet time. And then, like, I think 1 or 2 singles out of the group had their quiet time. I was shocked. And so I think even beyond ourselves, I think, you know, for us to really impart that to the younger, because of course as people get older, they might feel the need more, or they might have become disciples at a time when we were more hardline on expectations of quiet times, you know, and so the older women are, you know, in the habit and they feel the need, but I think we have to make sure that we train the younger people in the church because
To have quiet times.
I was, you know, I think that's our responsibility as well as, you know, middle-aged people.
Yeah, it's just really, really essential. And when I study the Bible with teens, it's something we talk about with the teenagers. Like I studied the Bible with one of the sons of one of the great brothers in the churches in India, and this young boy was praying every day 10 minutes and reading the Bible 10 minutes, which was, you know, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, it's not terrible.
Yeah.
But you know, I encouraged him, you've got to do better. And he really took that to heart. Like, how can someone argue with the fact that you got to do better in your quiet times? It's hard for me to argue when people challenge me I need to read my Bible every day. What am I going to say? Oh, I don't know. I've been teaching that for 20 years, but I disagree. I mean, right?
Yeah.
So, make the time to pray. Number 2, don't just bend and sway. You're very familiar with the passage in Mark 3. Jesus' mother is coming, and Jesus is not even eating, and his family, being very loving, says he must be crazy because he's not even eating. And you know that's true. If your family sees you, you're looking terrible, you're so thin, you know.
It was an Indian mother.
Okay. or an American mother, an Italian mother. I mean, they're concerned because he wasn't eating. And in Mark 3, verse 31 to 35, it says, Then Jesus' mothers and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone to call him in. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you. Who are my mother and my brothers, he asked. Then he looked at those seated in a circle around him, and he said, Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. And you see here, Jesus' family was concerned about him. And they loved him. And yet he wasn't swayed by his family. Interestingly, some of us are okay with that. Like we go, yep, I would stand firm against my family, no problem. Maybe you did it as a young disciple. Maybe you've always stood up against your family. I don't know. Maybe you haven't. But, you know, your family is one of the people that you should not be bent in the wrong way. Sometimes we get bent up by our family. You know, they make us feel guilty. Sometimes certain members of our family know how to make us feel guilty, right? And when you feel guilty, you'll do all kinds of things that maybe you shouldn't do. And sometimes people make you feel guilty. They're good at it. It's a manipulation tool. And maybe you need to feel guilty. But you should never let your behavior be governed by someone who's trying to make you feel guilty. You've got to make your behavior on the basis of what you think is right, not on the basis of what someone else wants you to do. Right?
Yeah.
And this is really important because many of us spend our life under authority, but where does authority end and manipulation begin? Sometimes it's not. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
There are times when you have to use your judgment and go, wait a minute, this is beyond authority, and this is getting into, you know, matters of opinion where I'm letting someone in authority try to control my life in a way that maybe is not what Christ wants. Are you with me here?
Yeah.
And this is important because when you give in to that kind of pressure is when you're in the most trouble. Especially if you have multiple bosses. How many of you have more than one boss at work? Okay. But you might have multiple bosses, okay? And that's not bad. I'm not blaming anybody if they have more than one. But you have more than one person that you really should answer to.
Sure.
Okay? And that can be difficult if they're not talking to each other and they have different expectations of you. Or if they actually have contradictory expectations. That can really put you in a bind. Well, you know, in Luke 13, you have a scenario where the Pharisees come to Jesus. Don't you love it when people give us bad news? And the Pharisees come to Jesus, and the Pharisees were no friend of Jesus. It's not like they were coming to Jesus to go, Jesus, we admire you so much. We appreciate this amazing ministry. All these years we've failed to reach out to people and love them, but man, you're really making a difference. That wasn't their spirit.
Well,
They were like, leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you. That's awesome. Thanks for the tip. I mean... And I love Jesus' response. He says, you go tell that fox. I will drive out demons and heal people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I'll reach my goal.
amen.
But I've got to keep going until I reach Jerusalem. Because prophets can't die outside Jerusalem. I mean, wow. Here he has Herod and the Pharisees. I mean, this is some pretty hardcore, you know, like if you're going to sway... You know, people saying they want to kill you, that's a, you know, that could enter into your calculations from time to time. And yet Jesus was so amazingly confident. I mean, wow, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, Nadine?
Oh, yes. I think the point that we talked about here when we were preparing this earlier was, you know, that we have to learn to say no. And it's not just with family. I think it's just... You know, there's just so much all the time, so much going on. And I think all of us here in this room, I think are all very, very, very busy people. And just, it's so hard to decide sometimes what to say no to. Because we want to say yes to everything, I think, you know, most of us. And we feel a sense of duty towards our job, towards our commitment in the church, towards our family, towards our children, towards... You know, I mean, and I know for the sisters that, you know, on top of that, then you have to be a good homemaker, and you have to cook, and you have to do all your housework, and, you know, and it can be totally overwhelming, and, you know, but I think, you know, really taking a step back and saying, no, okay, so more important, and we've talked about this, obviously, the first point, you know, relationship with God, even, like, time for each other, with the family. Even today, you know, I'm working on this proposal. I was working all afternoon while Mark took the kids out on this proposal that I have to do. It has to be finished. It's a great opportunity for Hope to do something great. And so it's a new thing we're doing. And I felt like I was enjoying it too much. Like, I thought, I've got to get this finished. It's exciting. Da, 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 da. Then I thought, you know, one of the things we decided this year was that we need to spend time together once a week, right?
Yeah.
And we hadn't done that, and I was like, we need to sit down together. We need to, we were not able to go out on a date this week, but we at least need to sit down together and have a, touching base, communicating, running through life, how are things, and so on. And so I literally had to pull myself away from what I was doing and just say, okay, enough for today. If it's not finished today, it's not the end of the world.
That's right.
That's right.
I'll do it tomorrow. But it was hard. It's a conscious decision you have to make, and I think like every day we're faced with these choices where we have to decide what's more important in the big scheme of things.
That's
and
right.
one of the things that Mark has talked about before that is really stuck with me over the years is we've got to make a difference between what's urgent and what's important.
That's right.
And how we tend to do the urgent all the time instead of thinking, wait a minute, what's the important? And I think these are hard decisions to make day to day because we try to do everything and then we end up missing out on the important things and doing the things that are really not that important in the end. And 10 years from now, I won't remember what day I finished the proposal. The truth is, it's not due until Tuesday. So, but the quality of our marriage, and it gets affected if we don't talk.
That's right.
If we don't sit down and talk, then probably there'll be trouble brewing on the horizon. So, so yeah, I mean that's just my personal experience.
So don't just bend and sway.
Amen.
A lot of us who have good hearts bend and sway all the time. We're always trying to kind of help out the next person whose hair is on fire.
Yeah.
And people learn that the best way to get us to do things is to have our hair on fire. And so you constantly are having people with their hair on fire coming up to you because they know that if the hair's on fire, you're going to help. And whereas if you actually react to people, oh, your hair's on fire, that's fascinating.
Why don't you douse it yourself?
I'll get back to you on that.
I never know.
And you can train people that if you call me with your hair on fire, it's probably not going to go well for you. And so you probably need to, not be quite so urgent and you'll get a better result from me.
That's right.
And so you can actually train people because people who keep coming to you, you can teach them what's going to work with you without being rude. Okay, and being rude is our temptation, but I really want to encourage you to, as you pray, and this is one of the reasons you pray to God for wisdom about, okay, Lord, give me the wisdom to know what I can really make a difference with if I spend time on.
That's right.
Give me the wisdom to know what I really am wasting my time on. And where, even though perhaps I'd like to do it, I'm not really going to achieve much with this. And give me the wisdom to know what only I can do. Because there's some things that no one else can do. And, there's some things that someone else might be able to do. Either you can delegate it or somebody else might pick it up if you don't do it. But it's really important to go through life strategically deciding this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm not going to do. And I'm going to feel good about this. And I'm not going to live my life controlled by guilt. I mean, for me, this is probably the biggest change I've made in the last 10 years or so. Is I would be so driven by guilt. And no one made me feel guilty, okay? I understand this. It was me who would be guilty, not some evil person out there somewhere. I would respond to things people said, etc., but it was me who was responsible for my behavior, no one else. And I would be driven by this feeling of, oh, I should do more. Oh, I haven't brought enough visitors this week. Oh, I gotta, And I would always have something I'm feeling bad about. And I didn't live strategically enough thinking about, okay, some things I need to not feel guilty about. Maybe I'm not doing as much as I should, but I just can't improve this right now, given my other responsibilities. And it doesn't matter what people think. God knows my real situation.
Amen.
And I don't have to spend hundreds of hours explaining to everybody my situation, because that wastes time. I've got to trust in God that He knows. And one of the things I love in my work is they often say, use your judgment. And the assumption is your judgment will probably be right. And I think, wow, what a cool way to live. I mean, Go with your gut. Use your instinct. Be sincere. Be righteous. Don't be reactive.
Yeah.
But if you are trying to do the right thing as best you can and not being reactive, the chances are good you're going to make choices that are acceptable or decent in God's eyes.
That's right.
And you need to not bend and sway all the time.
That's right.
Feeling guilty all the time. And you have to know for yourself. Some of you here don't struggle with guilt. I mean, you're like, whatever. But others of us, we're pretty guilt-ridden. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but it can really cause you to be sinful. Or to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Or to be unhappy and then sinful. Okay.
And I think this group probably tends to be more on the guilt side. I mean, like this point Mark is making now, I don't think would apply to every group in the church with everyone, but I think with this group, because I think all of us here are leaders and we have a lot of responsibilities. And
well, you're the kind who turn up to a self-improvement session like this that doesn't, I mean, there's no reason to come here except that you want to be better as a human being, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no mandatoriness. I mean, the food's kind of nice, but that's not enough to get you to come all the way over here.
Oh, I don't know about that.
So I mean, it's nice fellowship, but what I'm saying is you are probably more oriented towards feeling convicted.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's good, but just be aware of that about yourself. And third thing is don't react today. So number 1 is make the time to pray. Number 2 is don't just bend and sway. And number 3 is don't react today. In Luke chapter 10, Nadine says this is taught all the time. So I was
What to the women?
To the women anyway. Martha, Martha. I love this passage. I mean, I never grow weary of Luke chapter 10. In fact, I never grow weary of the Bible. It's just so cool. But anyway, Jesus is going on his way, and the classic stressed out situation.
Yeah.
Okay, Martha opens up her home. John 12, Martha's getting better because she's still serving in John 12, but at least the focus is Judas's bad attitude and not hers. Okay, so she's managed not to mess up the dinner for Lazarus. It was Judas who messed it up, so that's kind of good. She flew under the radar for that one. But on this one, she managed to serve her sister, to serve the Lord, to serve the smelly disciples. Nothing personal, but one has to suspect that a group of 11 men who are fishermen are not going to be the best smelling. Which is why when Jesus washed their feet, he really was being serving. Okay? And Martha was really serving, and we need to be pretty fired up about that. Mary was really spiritual. Now, was Mary serving enough? I don't know. I'm getting a little bit of a sense from the scriptures that Mary could have been a little bit more serving. Okay? I mean, that's the sense I'm getting, is that she was maybe a little bit too religious and a little bit too... But I don't know. I could be wrong, and I'm open to the Lord's rebuke on that. But...
Well, he didn't say she's doing the best. She's doing what is better.
Yeah, she's chosen what is better. She made a choice.
Yeah.
It was a choice she made, but it may be that Martha's more serving. So don't feel like Martha's terrible because she's serving. Just understand that Mary was good because she chose to sit at the feet of Jesus. But what we see here is Martha made an error that she didn't make later.
Yeah.
She was distracted, which is where, she wasn't prioritizing properly, was she? She was so concerned that everything be perfect for this dinner that she spent too much time on the dinner. And not enough time on... She should have just said, look, it really doesn't matter if the dinner's not perfect. It'll be fine. Okay, it's fine. Just don't worry. Just chill. Okay? She wasn't able to chill. And that was a mistake on her part. And she was distracted. And then she made a huge mistake. And the biggest mistake, it says in Proverbs, that a fool can do is to open their mouth.
Oh, well.
And this is something that I have certainly learned in my brief life. Is that even a fool will be thought wise if he says nothing.
That's right. Pretty hard.
But isn't it hard?
It is.
Except for Ram.
Even for James.
Ram Kumar is one of the wisest guys around.
They can keep quiet.
No, I'm serious. What we see here is that this... When I look back at some of the stupidest things I've ever said or done, invariably they are my immediate instinctive reaction.
Yeah.
Generally where emotions have entered into it as well. And now with the telephone and the email,
oh my gosh,
you are capable of doing stupid things immediately. Faster. Like you can fire off you ever gotten into a spitting war by SMS or email?
Oh yeah.
With James I did.
Yeah, I remember that.
I mean,
a few years ago.
I'm happy to say that I really try to avoid the food fights by email and SMS. I mean, I get some really interesting ones, and I've been like, wow, that's a curious email. Okay, we'll just file that one away. But, you know, I've definitely reacted by phoning people or making judgments or saying, sometimes it's just I'll slander someone. Like I'll hear something. And then I'll be immediately angry and slander the person that I heard something about, like when Jesus hears about Herod or whatever. And that's what Martha did. Martha is slandering her sister and is rebuking Jesus. I mean, this is not good. She's judging Jesus, that Jesus doesn't care. Yeah. Frequently the disciples would say to Jesus that he didn't care.
That's right.
I mean, you know, this isn't the first time. He was often accused of not caring, which I find very interesting. Okay, Jesus is not very loving according to the disciples. You know, and you could even have had a revolution on that basis if you had wanted to, that a lot of disciples say that Jesus isn't caring. Let's go around the room and I'll talk about it. Okay? But we didn't do that, thankfully. They just crucified him instead. So, but on the basis of claiming to be the Messiah, not on not caring issue. So what we see is that this reacting immediately almost always leads us into trouble. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
And think about it. If you want to take your top 10 stupidest things you've done, and we don't want to know what those are, by the way.
Not much, Shirley.
Okay. But as I look back on some of my 10 greatest hits, I'm pretty sure that almost all of them were reactions that if I had waited a little bit,
right,
I might have done a little better.
Yeah.
right.
You know, I might have thought, maybe saying nothing would be slightly better in this situation.
Yeah.
You know, and I've really tried to learn that, you know, as I go forward in life and I face new situations, new relationships. I think, that's interesting. I know how fools look wise. They say nothing. You know, and I know that I can't make a mistake if I say nothing. But I might make a mistake if I say something. And I know I'm very capable of that. I have a good track record. You know what I'm saying? And you may also, everyone except Ram, may have a record. And I'm not trying to persecute you, okay? It's actually a good quality to not speak too quickly. But don't react today. And if you could just get this one little point, I mean, look, it's taken me 25 years. You get this one if you could get this one little point into your little head before your death, that, you know, shut up, don't say anything. It'll probably be better if you just keep quiet and do nothing, because you're going to make it worse by reacting. Now, I'm not saying don't deal with things or whatever, but don't react, because often our reactions with our spouse, with our kids, you ever had your kid do something you think they are the devil incarnate? And you're like, you're grounded for life. You will never watch TV until you're married, you know. I mean, what's that, you know? And yet, you have that feeling. It's just so frustrating. Like, why don't you obey, you know? And that's probably not the optimal way to secure obedience.
I know.
And we all know this, and we go, but we do it. And so, if we could see that Jesus really, you know, he could have said all kinds of things. But he said, Martha, Martha. You know, and I'm sure it wasn't a rude Martha, Martha. It was just, Martha, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're getting stressed about a lot of stuff. It's all right. Mary, look at Mary here. And that must have really gotten Martha.
That's right.
You know, but Jesus was really calm. And I'm sure he did the right thing, being the Son of God. But he had that ability to not react.
Yeah.
And so that's just something for us to think about, Nadine.
Yeah, I never react, so
Oh,
why are you laughing? Okay, obviously, yes. I mean, you know, I very kind of, you know, in the moment all the time. And so I don't always succeed, obviously, but I try to make myself, wait for 24 hours. It's the hardest thing because waiting for 24 hours means I'm going to be thinking about it the whole time for 24 hours. But I think what it does when I succeed, which I don't always do, but when I succeed waiting 24 hours, it gives me time to decide whether what I'm going to say is a godly conviction or if it's a reaction. And sometimes things need to be said, but if you wait 24 hours by then, you'll say it nicely and calmly, and it may be firm, but it won't be angry.
Yeah.
So I can't say that I always succeed at this, unfortunately. Like when I had the SMS war with James, I did not wait 24 hours. And it was like.
I don't remember that. But.
Oh, it was a long time ago. Long time ago. Yeah.
5 years ago.
I don't remember this, so I'm glad.
But that's
good.
just not helpful. So yeah.
Amen. Okay, let's turn it off now. Hey guys, hope you learned lots of points.
Amen. Awesome.
Okay.